Welcome to the Grounded podcast with your host, Dr. Iman. This is a space where the intellectual meets the spiritual. I'm a professor, scholar of religion, and someone trying to find her footing. Together, we'll seek clarity not in passivity or bypassing, but in intuition, critique, and imagination. Some episodes are just me, reflecting on where I'm finding my footing. Others draw more closely from my own research on religion and spirituality, tracing where I've seen others find theirs. And sometimes we're joined by experts, friends, and even you, the listeners, learning with each other and seeking rootedness together. So wherever this episode takes us, I'm really glad you're here. Let's get grounded. In this episode, you'll hear me talk about the very complex and sometimes maybe a little too intense relationship that I have had with time, and how a beautiful concept, that of dream time, as written by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, really changed how I think about my responsibility to, as they say, use my time wisely. And as always, you can find the readings I reference in the show notes. Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Iman. And to know me is to know that I have a really complex and some might say intense relationship to time. I always joke that I can literally feel a minute in my body, and then I feel like my relationship to time and patience is my cross to bear in life. As an undergraduate student, I was one of those students who would map my walking route to my classes as soon as I knew what building they were going to be in. That way I could ensure I would never be late. I was always that kid who arrived to things a little bit too early and would hide in the bathroom. And that is because since I can remember, that time has always felt like a really big responsibility, something that's not to be wasted, and something that is like really urgent, that one must always be doing something in order for time to be well spent. And I remember, being young, I'm a professor now, but in undergrad thinking, oh man, can I even go into academia? Because I just felt that grad school and being a scholar was just a profession where time moved so slowly. And to be honest, it is something that I still struggle with. I joke that for a lot of people who work in other corporate environments, and that is because I also believe higher education is a corporate environment, but for folks who work in other kinds of corporate environments where things work in kind of end of business day terms, in academia, when it comes to writing and research, things can take months, years. You can write something and submit it to a journal or an editor, and you're not going to get that back until like a year from now. So time just moves very differently in academia. PhD can take anywhere from 5 to 8 years. And so I just knew 18, 19, 20-year-old Iman was just like, is that a relationship to time I can really handle? Especially because I was just feeling what Martin Luther King frequently called the fierce urgency of now. I just have always had this feeling. And I'm reflecting on that feeling because right now we are in a moment where there's lots of discussion of time. So it is Ramadan. Yesterday just wrapped up the last day of Black History Month. It's Women's History Month now. And this is a time where some Muslims fast from sunrise to sundown with no food or water. And I've always found I've been fasting since I was like 8 or 9. So for, fasting for longer than I haven't at this point in life. And I just have always found that this is a month in the year where my relationship to time feels so much more forgiving and calmer. I find myself that fasting, not eating and drinking during the day makes me feel more present, and that I'm much less hard on myself because I'm way more aware of my physical limitations. So I'm not hard on myself for optimizing every hour because I know, okay, the last time I had a drink of water was 8 hours ago. So I just take things a lot more slowly. And I know for a fact, that this feeling does not come from within, that it's capitalism that overworks us, that makes us feel like we don't have enough time. And I think that for those of us who are also really tapped into seeing the world for what it is, while also knowing that there has been so many people and so many dreams of what it could be, you feel just a sense of urgency that things need to happen. Work needs to be done. I need to be doing the work to bring about the kind of humanity that my ancestors hoped for. So floating around in my whole life has always been this question of why time feels like pressure and responsibility to me. And to find grounding for that question that has been swirling around in my head since I can remember, I'm turning to an article by Alexis Pauline Gumbs called Prophecy in the Present Tense, Harriet Tubman, the Combahee Pilgrimage, and Dreams Coming True. And when I tell you that when I first read this article, it actually, and I'm not even being dramatic, I feel like it really healed my relationship to time. Now, I first encountered Alexis Pauline Gumbs through a friend who actually recommended that we include her book, Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals, in this working group that we were organizing in my department for religious studies, which is also a stunning book that talks about, as the title suggests, all the Black feminist lessons that we can learn from marine mammals. And after reading it, my enamoration for Gumbs and the way that she bridges the spiritual and the intellectual just began from there. And so I'm not actually sure when or how I encountered this specific article, but I know that once I did, oh, you want to know what? I'm actually remembering that I was feverishly, furiously, whatever the word is, trying to find research on Black women's psychics. And I think through the searches, this popped up. I'm remembering that when I was writing my first dissertation chapter. I remember seeing her name and I was like, oh, of course, it makes sense that she would be someone that perhaps would be writing about psychicness or something adjacent to it, just in the way that I had previously encountered her work beforehand. And I'm bringing this article back up today because it just feels like such a relevant intervention into the time chatter that I hear all the time swirling in my head and that I also hear around me, right? Don't waste your time. We're in the end of times. But like I said, the way that Gumbs talks about time in this article, I kid you not, it really flipped a switch for me. That when you think about time as dream time, which is what she encourages us to do in the article, time is never wasted. And it's also so much bigger than the individual. So Alexis Pauline Gumbs is a queer Black feminist writer, scholar, and community facilitator whose work centers ancestral love, collective care, and transformative intellectual practice. She's a poet and cultural theorist. Her work and writing responds to the needs of her communities, creating space for mourning, movement, and healing. She was the co-editor of Revolutionary Mothering, Love on the Front Lines, which was a volume that really reshaped the conversation of parenting and queer life. She's also written an incredible trio of books with Duke University Press that has really expanded the possibilities of scholarly and creative writing and inspired artistic work from multiple forms. And she's also the founder of Brilliance Remastered, a network of retreats and learning spaces dedicated to ancestor accountable intellectual practices and community-grounded artistic and scholarly work. And it's actually her work in community through these gathering and retreat spaces that she creates through the Internal Summer of the Black Feminist Mind and Mobile Homecoming Collective that takes center stage in this article. So in her article, which is called Prophecy in Present Tense, Harriet Tubman, the Combahee Pilgrimage, and Dreams Coming True, Alexis Pauline Gumbs is, I think, at her spiritual and intellectual best. This is the piece of her writing that hits the hardest for me because I'm somebody with a wounded relationship to time. In the piece, Gumbs writes about the Combahee Pilgrimage, where 21 Black feminists gathered at the Combahee River in 2013 to honor two pivotal moments in Black feminist history and Black women's history. The first was the 150th anniversary of the Combahee River Raid, during which Harriet Tubman led nearly 800 enslaved Africans to freedom, burned down 32 plantation buildings, flooded the rice plantations that formed the center of South Carolina's Confederate economy, and basically created this huge moment where now these newly freed people also joined Union forces. The second moment is that the group also gathered to honor the legacy of the Combahee River Collective, a Black feminist, lesbian, socialist organization known for its analysis of interlocking oppression and for laying the groundwork for the later popularization of terms like identity politics and intersectionality, and they were founded in 1974. So this group of 21 plus Black women and Black genderqueer folks gathered on the Combahee River as a means of honoring their ancestors, both Tubman and the 800 enslaved Africans who freed themselves, as well as the Combahee River Collective, formed in 1971. And so this article makes two moves that just blow my mind. Is that the Black feminist tradition and this history that she is talking about between what she's doing in 2013 when she shows up with the collective to honor these historical moments in the 1970s and 80s with the Combahee River Collective, and then in 1863 with the uprising. She says that these moments constitute for her what she calls the magical nonlinearity of dream time that Black history and Black feminist history works in. So, what is she talking about? She opens the article with this beautiful piece of history that perhaps some people know, maybe others don't, but that Harriet Tubman was someone who was said to have visions. Now, these visions are attributed to a traumatic brain injury that she suffered from at the hands of I believe, either a slave owner or an overseer who hit her in the head with an anvil for defending and getting in the way of their abuse of another enslaved persons. So after that moment, Tubman in history is described as having visions. Some describe her as psychic. Some describe her as epileptic, that she would often enter into trance states and even suffered from seizures. But Gumbs brings us to a moment in 1862, a year before the raid actually took place, where Tubman was said to wake up on that day and told the people around her that she had a dream and repeated the phrase over and over and over again, "My people are free." So Gumbs turns to Tubman's dreams into her use of the present tense. Again, my people are free, not my people will be free. And so she uses this present tense to invite us to think about how Tubman was operating in what she calls, and I introduced before, dream time. And in this reading, Tubman knew, even before the raid, that her people would be free. And so Gumbs asks us to consider the power of a dream in which freedom already exists, and that to be liberated is simply about removing the barriers that stood in the way. And she writes about how Tubman's use of the present tense and imagining freedom in the present tense allowed Tubman to move and organize this massive uprising with a confidence of freedom that it was not to be a distant dream, but was already unfolding. And Gumbs wonders how this vision may have shaped Tubman's leadership during the Combahee River Raid, the largest collective act of resistance she organized. And she also invites us to imagine what Tubman might have seen in that dream. Perhaps she saw future generations of Black women, like the 20 plus Black women that gathered in 2013 at that river to honor her and to honor their freedom. A group of women who, at that river, repeated over and over again the mantra that she woke up with, "My people are free." And when I read this, I just thought, oh my gosh, wow. Because it made me think of this present moment that we are in, this kind of fierce urgency that one feels. It's not reducible to a single lifetime, that we could possibly, as Gumbs suggests, be living in someone's dream, but also creating dreams ourselves that others will live in. And it made me really think about the interconnected relationship to time and our ancestors that are possible. It brought me back to a moment in 2013 when I had first started college. And I remember that there was a really popular phrase going around, and it was on t-shirts, it was everywhere, and it was, "We are our ancestors' wildest dreams." And I remember hearing this in college. I started in 2013, significant. This is the summer before Black Lives Matter had kicked off. Trayvon Martin had been murdered. And I just remember feeling really skeptical because it made me think our ancestors wanted better for us than this present moment. I think that they actually dreamed of worlds and possibilities of being human that far exceeded what we were experiencing in that moment, that far exceeds what we experience now. And I just felt that the declaration of saying we are our ancestors' wildest dreams is underselling the imaginative possibilities that they laid out for us. And as you guys are going to see when I frequently talk about my past self, the self that first started on this journey of bridging the spiritual and the intellectual through my work in academia, that I have softened with age. In college, I was no doubt, you remember that Boondock scene
where I think it's either Riley or Huey asks this kid, "What's up?" And he's like, "What's up? Struggle is up, my brother. Progression is up, my brother. Salami, eggs, and bacon." Like that was me. And so when I think about where I am right now, I just feel like I have so much more of a softer orientation towards the fierce urgency of now. And I think that is really because of what I have encountered in the Black feminist tradition, a tradition that really challenges these very kind of secular and capitalist understandings of time and success as reducible to an individual lifetime, as scarce. And so when I read this piece by Gumbs, it felt like a real relief to the kind of skepticism that I had felt towards the phrase, "we are our ancestors' wildest dreams," because it made me think that the present tense of the statement, "we are," is both a statement about the present, but that a future in which all their dreams do come true is just a matter of time. That prophecy and present tense exist together, and that we too will be ancestors whose dreams will be answered by the generations ahead of us. And it took away the kind of burden I felt towards the present moment, even this present moment. And it made me think about it as a part of a longer dream that extends well beyond my lifetime or any individual's single lifetime. That, as Gumbs theorizes, our time is not just our own or finite or scarce, that it's radically connected to our ancestors, and it will be radically connected to the people that come after us. The second move that Gumbs makes in this piece is how, through her work with the internal summer of the Black feminist mind and mobile homecoming organization and groups, that they quite literally turn the Black feminist tradition into a spiritual tradition explicitly. And it felt like a real yes moment, being a young academic. And I actually hope that I just experience these moments at every turn, where you see a scholar do something without qualification or justification, and it's the very thing you have felt compelled to defend, explain, or not do just yet. And that is exactly how I feel about Alexis Pauline Gumbs thinking with the Black feminist tradition in explicitly spiritual terms. She's not justifying it. She's not coming up with a definition of religion and spirituality to fit her analysis of this moment into a historical context. No, she is just explicitly writing about it in the way that she engages the tradition, which is also deeply spiritual and deeply political. And this comes through most clearly in the way that the group honors, and then the way that Gumbs writes about how the group honored the Combahee River Collective, which was founded in 1974. Group turned the Combahee River Collective's words into what she calls critical ritual activities. And as a scholar of religion, we know that much of ritual is repetition. Now, that doesn't mean that every time you repeat something, you're just rotely doing it and it doesn't have new meaning. No, but that a fundamental part of ritual is the repetition of certain things. So we see that in the way that in 2013, Gumbs in this group honors the Combahee River Collective through repetition, through chanting. A huge part of these critical ritual activities was repeating and chanting the words that the Combahee River Collective had gifted them and had gifted the Black feminist tradition. And so the 2013 group used the Combahee River Collective statement that Black women are inherently valuable. I'll say that again. Black women are inherently valuable as a mantra for bringing out and leaving in the river moments and thought patterns in their own lives that made them feel unworthy. And she writes about how during the entire 3-day retreat at the river, they kept repeating this mantra whenever feelings of self-doubt or unworthiness would come up for them. It was a mantra that even after the retreat, that they would continue to repeat to themselves and to each other whenever they encountered news that broke them. And they also repeated Lorraine Hansberry's quote, "We can impose beauty on our future." And so they're repeating these phrases. Black women are inherently valuable. We can impose beauty on our future as mantras and chants, bringing their ancestors' words and the Combahee River Collective's words from the 1970s and 80s, bringing that life force into the present moment. And so Gumbs also writes about all these beautiful synchronicities that happened during the retreat, that while the group in 2013 was on the river reading Tubman's narrated description of the Combahee River uprising and the coming storm that she talked about as leading up to the raid, that in that very moment in 2013, that it began to rain. And as soon as they wrapped up her narrated version, the rain went away. They talked about how after completing their ceremony on the actual anniversary date, that the group passed by a church that was also honoring the Combahee River uprising, and they were welcomed into this church as honored guests. And for many participants, especially those who had felt, exiled from church spaces and other sacred spaces because they were gender and sexually queer, that the moment was one of deep healing that they just never anticipated. And it's through this critical ritual activity of bringing the Combahee River Collective's words from the 1970s and 80s into the present moment and remembering and honoring the 1863 raid that Gumbs and organizers transform Black women's history into a living spiritual tradition. And she closes by reminding us that Black feminism lives because we continue to water it with our time, our practices, our creativity, our presence, and because our ancestors and the spirits that sustain us also water it too. So again, it just made me think of time. Whenever you think of time, I would always think about it as like a line. And as I've grown older, I've started to visualize time as a bit of a circle. But there's something about reading Gumbs' piece that makes me think about time as actually a water vessel. And then I imagine all of these people, or really actually all of these hands with their own vessels pouring into that single vessel. So if the present moment is that vessel on the table and then the hands above it are pouring water into it, and that felt really breathtaking for me. And Gumbs really encouraged us to see that the Combahee pilgrimage was and is a dream realized in 1863 when Tubman, well actually in 1862, when Tubman woke up and she said, "My people are free." She spoke a prophecy in the present tense, and Gumbs traces how we are living out that prophecy in the present moment. And so I found this so powerful because one often thinks that you have to go looking for the spiritual and the religious in spaces that have already been authorized and designated as religious and spiritual, right? This is like a huge intervention in religious studies as to find religion and spirituality basically everywhere and not just in the spaces that we are taught through world religion classes, that religion actually exists everywhere, not just where we've been told that it exists. And to me, Gumbs also models a kind of agency and choice around where one finds spiritual connection, that it makes total sense for us to find spiritual and ancestral connection in intellectual traditions that and histories that have often been historicized as just simply secular, as just simply intellectual, when the people themselves who comprise those very traditions understood what they were doing in spiritual and psychic and religious terms. And so a part of honoring that history, a part of honoring the history of Tubman, a part of honoring the history of the Combahee River Collective is for us to grapple with the spiritual, or some might say even metaphysical, if you want to use that big word, dimensions of Black history that we actually don't get a full understanding of what exactly these traditions are. Are they just political? If we don't actually account for the spiritual dimensions for them, then we only see them as political secular traditions, when in reality, the spiritual, the religious, the metaphysical were so important to them. This was a group that treated the Black feminist tradition as a spiritual tradition, Black women's history as a spiritual history, and ritualized it, and will continue to do so. So what this continues to unsettle for me is that an individual lifetime is not the most important metric of time, and that an individual lifetime is also not the most important metric of success or prophecy realized. I'm leaving this piece and I'm leaving this reflection feeling grounded in thinking about whose prophecies I want to work for and to fulfill in this lifetime, and also the kinds of prophecies I'm trying to leave for future generations to carry on. So thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode. If you liked it, please, 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 I'm asking you to share with a friend, let them know what's going on over here. You can keep up with me where I share book recommendations, things I'm lecturing in class, and so much more of my own work at the intersections of the intellectual and the spiritual on social media. You can follow me at Iman, ABDK. That's my handle on Instagram and TikTok. IMANABDK. So please like and follow so that you don't miss an episode. And I will catch you guys next Monday.